And as we watched those comments from Trump and Vance and their allies in Congress over the weekend, it was clear that they were laying the groundwork to openly defy court orders. And today, a judge said they already have. Today, a federal judge ruled that the Trump administration has been violating a previous court order to lift the blanket spending freeze on federal grant programs. To put it plainly, the Trump administration froze spending. A judge told them to unfreeze it. And according to this judge, they didn't. And that kind of puts us in uncharted territory. In fact, some Democrats and legal experts say it leaves us smack dab in the middle of what they're calling a constitutional crisis. And look, I know phrases like that can sometimes sound vague and abstract and academic. But as I said, this country relies on a system of checks and balances between three co-equal branches of government for good reason. So when the Trump administration ignores that principle, when it defies the judiciary and dares the courts to enforce their orders, it is threatening the Constitution itself, hence a constitutional crisis. Starting us off tonight is retired federal judge Nancy Gertner. After retiring from the federal bench, she became a professor at Harvard Law School. Judge Gertner, thank you so much for taking the time. You're the perfect person to help us make sense of what is happening here. So let me just start with what we saw today, because for the first time, we saw a federal judge accuse the Trump administration of defying a court order. And the judge said the White House has not complied with an order to release federal funding that it had frozen. I just want to pause on that because it feels to me, I'm not a lawyer, I'm certainly not a judge, feels very significant to me. But you were a federal judge. What do you think?
I think it is significant, but your introduction was suggesting that there's something very, academic about it, and it's really very, very straightforward here. Trump had a lawful way to do all of this. Yeah, he had a lawful way to do all of this. He has the Congress. There are steps that one can follow. There are rules to be followed, and all he did is completely ignore that and ignored his own Congress, which is really something that should give all of us pause, and issued these executive orders, which Dahlia Lithwick describes as like letters to Santa. They were badly drafted, and half the time, he didn't have the authority to do it. When a federal judge issues an order, the federal judge is making a determination for a preliminary order that there's a likelihood of success on the merits, so it has to be a strong case. Judges don't do this out of the air. And furthermore, that there has to be irreparable harm. And the notion that judges across the country have done this really should give this government pause, that they have done what they've done is not just mildly illegal, but very, very illegal. And judges have recognized that. To your point about this comment about, how federal judges have no business dealing with legitimate executive actions, as you said, legitimate is the point here. What they are doing isn't even close to legitimate.
Yeah,
will they defy it?
That's the question. I mean, first of all, it is literally their job. Let me ask you this question, because on the defy it, because this judge began this order by citing a Supreme Court case that says people who defy orders like this risk being held in criminal contempt. And we went through kind of a version of this last year. What does that look like, and what can it look like for a sitting president and a sitting administration?
Well, I mean, it could look like a range of things. It could look like fines. It's a little hard to imagine that Elon Musk will be deterred by a fine, but it could be fines. You could be, civil contempt would be, you could be jailed until you have remedied the situation. But no one ever gets to that. And as I said, particularly here where the illegality is really clear, there is no question about it. If they don't like these rulings, they can appeal. And Trump certainly knows how to do that. So the notion that they would be so there were processes to follow in order to do what he wanted to do, and he's basically blowing through that. In addition, if there are rulings that he doesn't like, he can appeal. The notion that he would just defy says something very troubling about this president and his administration.
No question. And he obviously hasn't appealed it, as you said. That is a legitimate process that anyone can go through or approach. If he appeals it, a lot of people throw out this notion that this question about executive power could go to the Supreme Court. And that's where it could land. I don't know if you agree with that. But what do you think? I think there's a lot of skepticism, probably among a lot of people watching, that the 6-3 conservative court would rule the right way. What are you watching for, and how do you think they would look at this question?
Well, there's a structural problem, which is that the Supreme Court is not equipped to deal with the 45 cases that are percolating through the court, right? They'll take one or two. Mm-hmm. They'll take maybe one, and they'll take birthright citizenship. They may take the impoundment cases. Again, with this administration and with this court, I'm not sure I can predict anything, but it would really be extraordinary if they gave him the power that he is seeking. It would just be extraordinary on both birthright citizenship and on the impoundment question. I've been surprised by this court, but still, that would be essentially enabling a coup. It's not a judicial coup that we're seeing. It's an executive coup. And if the Supreme Court went along with it, they would be enabling that as well.
Judge Nancy Gertner, thank you so much. It was a real pleasure.
Vice President J.D. Vance is questioning whether courts can block actions taken by the president, and some are inferring that he's raising the possibility that the president just ignore these orders. This is what the vice president wrote, quote, "Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power." This followed a judge's order that temporarily blocked Elon Musk and his team from accessing sensitive Treasury Department systems. With us now is CNN senior legal analyst, former assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, and Philadelphia Eagles fan. That is why I am wearing the tie this morning for you, sir. Good morning, Elie Honig. So J.D. Vance writes, judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power. We maybe should underline and bold that word legitimate there because it's doing a lot of work. What can courts do?
It certainly is doing a lot of work, John, and J.D. Vance is really stepping very close to dangerous ground with that statement, and he knows it, by the way. This is a Yale Law School graduate. So the notion that the courts cannot stop the executive from doing what he wants, the notion that the executive may have the option of defying the courts, that is completely beyond even what the most extreme right-wing conservative theory in favor of broad executive power has ever argued. Now, look, there is a very broad view of executive power. Sometimes it's called the unitary executive theory, which holds essentially that the president is all powerful within the executive branch. But even proponents of that theory do not say that the president is free to disregard an order of the court. If that were to happen, that is a line in the sand. That has not been crossed. Donald Trump did not cross that line in his first 4 years. He has not crossed that line in his first couple weeks here in his second term. But if we get over that line, then we've got a major crisis. And I think it's irresponsible of J.D. Vance. I know he didn't quite go there, but he got pretty close to even suggest that.
And to be clear, the courts stopped all kinds of executive action from President Biden, too. The courts jump in all the time on executive actions because the Constitution is sort of murky on what a president can and can't do. Let me just read you the first part of Vance's tweet, because this actually sort of expands on his thinking. If a judge tried to tell a general how to conduct a military operation, that would be illegal. If a judge tried to command the attorney general and how to use her discretion as a prosecutor, that's also illegal. But here's the thing. When a judge weighs in on powers that belong to Congress, on laws that Congress passed, and the executive, the president, may be ignoring or crossing the line on those laws, that might be another thing.
Yeah, I mean, even the premise of J.D. Vance's statement there is incorrect. I mean, judges do have the authority to block extra constitutional actions by the executive branch or by Congress. And John, you're exactly right. That has happened countless times to every administration in recent history and probably in the entire history of the United States. And it's part of being president. Presidents have railed publicly against decisions by the judiciary, but at times that's what the judiciary does. That's what the judiciary exists for, to say, no, you've gone too far, either Congress or executive branch. And by the way, we are seeing this spate of decisions from district court judges. Those are trial level federal judges. We'll see another one today on the buyout issue. But remember also, there's a process here. If you lose in the district court and you're the administration and you don't like it, you have the right to appeal up to the Court of Appeals. And then you can even ask the next level, the U.S. Supreme Court, to take the case. So it's not as if the game is over once the district court judge rules. There's still many other layers of protection and appeal built in there, too.
So to what extent, Elie, do you think that the White House, the Trump White House, knows this and this is a concerted strategy? I ask you this because I read this renowned legal scholar over the last few days who said that the White House is engaging in what's called a make me strategy.
So yeah, that I've heard that scholar is a little shaky in some of his opinions. Yeah, look, the strategy that Donald Trump has used here so far is he's going to do what he wants first. And then he's going to make plaintiffs. He's going to make state attorneys general. He's going to make private citizens go sue him in court. If they want to stop him from doing what he wants, they have to make him. So that's definitely been a strategy by the president, but that's not unconstitutional. Where it crosses a line is if that happens, he goes into court and a court says, you're not allowed to do this executive branch, or I'm putting it on hold, I'm putting an injunction. And then if the president or the executive branch defies that, that's where we get into real trouble here.
So folks, I've talked a bit about this, but you're seeing more reactions from judges, literal judges. You're seeing it from prosecutors. You're seeing it from the law profession more broadly. Trump is taking moves that he didn't even really do his first term, right? He really didn't. There were moments that got close to this, but the open defying of rulings is a level above. Trump used to break laws all the time. As an individual, we know he's a convicted felon, and his administration broke laws all the time, and the judges came around, often Republican judges, sometimes Trump-appointed judges, to smack him on the backside and say, no, 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 Mr. Trump, no, 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 Donnie, you're being naughty. And then usually he would just kind of stop doing what he was doing. He wouldn't apologize, but he would sort of grumble about it and then move on to the next scheme because the courts told him to stop. But here, what he and Vance are saying is we can just do what we want. We can just freeze government budgets. And when the courts tell us, no, you can't do that because broad decisions like that have to be in the hands of Congress, you can propose that Congress sends you a bill to abolish this government department or cut their budgets and then sign the law if it comes to your desk, but you are not king. And then what Trump is doing is he's still freezing the money. This is shocking. And if you want to know why judges, who usually are pretty measured people, are pissed right now, this is why.